Welcome back to Direct Station, where politics are in retrograde. I am Kate Carey. You've been wondering why the assassination of a conservative activist feels like a match thrown into gasoline that was already poured. Or if you've been wondering why the response feels more orchestrated than organic, which calls for tribunals and enemy lists emerging within hours. Or if you've been wondering why this particular death, this particular moment, seems to have revealed the state we're in. Or if you've been wondering why the words Reichstag and fire keep appearing in your feed, even though the parallels aren't quite right. Well, naturally, there is an explanation in the cosmic weather. Let's talk about it. For those of you just tuning in, around here we track what's happening with the humans and wonder about what's brewing in the sky in order to try to make sense of it all. Here's how it'll work. You will tolerate more astrology than you do in your day-to-day, and I will provide an alternative way to think through what is happening to us and to our country. First, we'll look at last week's events on the ground, and then we'll look at the events in the sky, and we will begin to notice their relationship with what the humans are doing on the ground. After that, we'll look at the history of similar planetary phenomena that might begin to give us a sharper sense of what is unfolding here. After the history, we'll make meaning and think through the big picture of it all, and placing our conclusions in a literary context. Who has spoken about such matters in ways that might be helpful to us now? And I will always leave you with some to-dos, should you want them, something to reflect on, and something to hopefully inspire you as you navigate such intense terrain. Also, if you're new here, I want to invite you to orient to the podcast not as a class where you're trying to learn new proper nouns or new place names or even new concepts, but rather as sort of an archetypal experience where we gain a broader understanding of what is happening archetypally within each of us. Like, what is the beautiful? What is the mischievous? What is the dangerous? What is the corrupt, right? Like really understanding sort of how these things flow together and how they interact with the sky. Think of it, if you will, like the Game of Thrones. Remember that first season before we knew any of the place names or any of the maps or any of the family names or any of the histories or any of the stories, the interpersonal stories? We cared about what we were watching unfold. Like the first 2, 3, 4 episodes, we had no idea about any of the rest of it, but we could kind of grasp what was happening because we understood the archetypes that each character represented, right? Because we know those archetypes, because we live them. And so this conversation is much like that, where you do not need a glossary. You can get one if you want. There's plenty of them available on the internet, but you don't need it. And this is really story time. And so just come in, sit down, relax, and I'll tell you a story about what's going on here and there, and we'll make sense of it together. So today we're going to talk about an assassination that does reveal the real state of how our country is doing, how advanced and on the brink of hot our cold civil war is. And we'll seek a better understanding of the riddles inscribed in the bullets at the heart of this story. They tell us a lot about where we are. And the planets, they're letting us know that, as Steve Judd, the great astrologer and teacher, often says, humanity is, at the end of an apprenticeship. It is time to rise and meet the moment. We're in that space now between the turning point and the completion. We are in the middle of the rising action, y'all. And what we do here matters. Let's start with what actually happened, because the events of the days since tell us as much as the event itself. Charlie Kirk, a radical, right-wing Christian, white supremacist nationalist, was assassinated while speaking about gun violence at Utah Valley University on September 10th at 12:23 p.m. I'm going to tell you this story using some of the words of the key people involved, because it really is a story that is rooted in language. Mr. Kirk's final words went something like this. Someone in the crowd was pushing back on the radical right's excitement about a data point from the life of the shooter at the Minneapolis school the prior week. The right had seized on the shooter's still emerging relationship with trans identity to demonize all trans people. The audience member asked, quote, "Do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?" End quote. "Too many," Kirk said. "5," his questioner responded, asking, quote, "Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?" Kirk asks, counting or not counting gang violence. We can only imagine what would have come after that, connecting race, poverty, gang violence, mass shootings, trans identity. We don't know. But instead, those are the man's last words. Within hours, we had Stephen Miller, one of the most powerful architects of the Trump administration's authoritarian project, tweeting, quote, "There is an ideology that has steadily been growing in this country, which hates everything good, righteous, and beautiful, and celebrates everything that is warped, twisted, and depraved." The one unifying thread, he said, is the, quote, "insatiable thirst for destruction that leads always inevitably and willfully to violence. The fate of millions depends on the defeat of this wicked ideology," end quote. By Friday, Miller was calling for military tribunals for radical left terrorists. And we already know how loosely the administration uses the word terrorist while simultaneously ceasing all actual domestic terrorism investigative capacity at the FBI. And today, the administration is, as I record this, seizing Charlie Kirk's platform, his podcast, and his audience to announce a sweeping crackdown on liberal thought more broadly. We had the president sitting behind the Resolute desk shortly after the murder saying, quote, "My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country." Oh, the irony. In other words, we had a coordinated messaging across right-wing media that included the notion that this was, quote, "the left's Reichstag moment," which is a fascinating projection given who's actually in power in the United States today. The folks who lit and used the false flag of the Reichstag fire in Germany in 1933 to declare an end to many of the civil liberties German citizens enjoyed were, in fact, Hitler's people. Hitler and those in his administration then used the fire as a legal basis for the imprisonment of anyone considered an enemy of the state and to make illegal any publications they didn't like. This was, of course, a major step in Germany's march towards a single-party system. The radical right, we have to begin to understand, has a common language and a quickly emerging intimacy with the details and strategies of Germany's march towards totalitarianism. Charlie Kirk built his career on dehumanization. He told his audiences that their neighbors were existential threats, that teachers were predators, that anyone supporting trans rights was destroying civilization. He turned human beings into targets. And his faction, who is running our government with the tacit approval of the only court that could stop it, is now using his death to escalate that same dehumanization. The rhetoric is not soft, it's hardening. They're not calling for peace. They're calling for war. Against whom, you might ask? Well, according to the latest from Miller, against, quote, "anyone who has enabled the radical left's violence," end quote, which apparently includes anyone who ever criticized Kirk, living or dead, anyone who supports sanctuary cities, anyone who uses pronouns in their bio, anyone who funds progressive causes. The enemy list is endless because the point isn't justice, it's justification. It's domination. It's dominion. The shooter himself embodied a peculiar nihilism that's worth understanding. He had inscribed his bullets with phrases from a video game called, truly, Helldivers 2. This is a satirical video game where players pretend to be fascists while pretending to fight fascists. A BBC investigation found that he had posted in gaming forums about how, quote, "both sides are fascists anyway." That horseshoe theory nihilism where everything becomes ironic and nothing has meaning. When you're so far left, you're right, or you're so far right, you're left. There is some talk that the man was romantically involved with his roommate, who identifies as trans, but it is yet quite unclear what role that played in this, if any. The right, of course, is seizing on it. This young man was someone who had marinated so long in online extremism that reality itself became a game where you shoot NPCs, non-player characters. That's what dehumanization does. It turns people into things. And every now and then, someone pulls a real trigger. But the phrases that we're now seeing in the discourse, the up and down arrows, which are a sequence from game console movements that cause bombings, the notices bulges commentary that is part of the casual insults young men leverage at each other, implying homosexuality while they're playing their video game or while they're talking about video game playing on the platform Discord. The hey fascist catch, though, brings us deeper into the video game that I hate to inform you, but we must now learn a little bit about in order to understand the murder. In the game, Helldivers 2, players fight for Super Earth, spreading managed democracy, aka fascism, posing as democracy, through extreme violence. So the game is a satirical take on fascistic militarism in which the players themselves are technically playing as the fascists. They are the authoritarian regime spreading their ideology through force, complete with propaganda, thought police, and friendly fire accidents targeted at dissent. The game's whole joke is that players enthusiastically roleplay as fascist super soldiers while being in on the satire. When Helldivers players call each other enemies or fascists, it's often with multiple layers of irony. They know they are the ones playing the fascistic regime. So the bullet casing message, hey fascist catch, followed by the arrow sequence one uses to drop the biggest bomb you've got within the game, becomes even more twisted and maybe even more confusing, especially to those of us outside of this elaborate subculture. The suspect appears to have taken this heavily ironic, satirical gaming context where calling someone a fascist while ordering an airstrike is part of the dark humor about being the actual fascist, and applied it unironically to real-world political violence. This is particularly disturbing because it shows how satirical content can be stripped of its critical context and then weaponized, especially when meme culture reduces complex satire to simple reaction images and community into mockery. Did he dislike Kirk, and why? Which side did he think everybody was on? It's important to notice the half-truths we're working with here because the leaders, from the governor to the president to the head of the fucking FBI, are releasing when they feel like it pieces of information that they have gathered from we know not where. His confusion becomes ours as the administration picks a villainous side in a battle that was apparently folding in and out and back on itself in the mind and plans of this single struggling person made dangerous by his access to and ease with firearms. This isn't the first political violence we've seen, of course. 2 Minnesota state senators were shot earlier this year. One of them died along with her dog and her husband. We had January 6th, of course, which cannot be forgotten. We've had synagogue shootings, black church shootings, school shootings, Walmart shootings. But this feels different because of how it's being used as a Rubicon moment, as an excuse to systematically target anyone deemed an enemy of the state, as they define it, as that definition broadens. So we find ourselves at this in-between moment where a seminal piece of the rising action in the story has already occurred, but the next is pending. So we need to make some sense of this moment, I say, by looking at the planets to understand their archetypal significance as this story unfolds upon us and within us relentlessly. So what's happening in the sky that makes this moment feel so pivotal, so much like a point of no return? Well, first, it must be said that this was eclipse energy. If you both listened last week and were not under a rock on Wednesday, you have certainly put that together by now. And remember, we have 2 of those this month. One was on the 7th and one is on the 21st. That is Sunday. And the sun was on the move from the point of one eclipse on the 7th to where he's going to land for the second eclipse on the 21st. And y'all listen, the sun at the moment of Kirk's death was at the literal exact halfway point between the 2 eclipse locations. Steve Judd pointed this out today as well. So this is an eclipse season, beginnings and endings, sudden developments that change everything. You'll never wonder why all the woo-woo people in your life care when it's eclipse season again, right? So when this occurred, you know that the first thing I needed to do was go to the United States birth chart, which is stamped 5:10 p.m. on July 4th, 1776, to understand the ways in which this turning point moment was sitting on the chart. One of the ways we understand events as they unfold in our lives is to look at the sky at the moment things occur, take a freeze frame of that sky. And we see how that is interacting with the birth of humans, institutions, and the lives of either as they travel on. So I looked at the sky at 12:32 p.m. Utah time on the 10th to see what interaction that moment was having with our country and its birth chart as it navigates its trajectory in this world. The most immediate glaring fact is that at that moment, the Mars in the sky was turning the Mars in the US chart. Mars is the god of war, of aggression, of action. When Mars trines another Mars, that's a particular angle, violence flows easily, naturally, like water finding its level. There is no resistance or friction. The violence feels effortless, inevitable, sometimes even righteous, certainly to the perpetrator. We see then that this wasn't just the generative violence of a single actor, but rather revealing how primed for violence we already were as a nation. Okay, so that's one angle, the Mars trining Mars, making it easy to be violent. Then we have a square, a tense, pushing, challenging angle that demands action or change. So that's the angle I'm going to tell you about here. At a 90-degree situation fraught with tension and a need for movement in the narrative as it unfolds. This is the moment in a Liam Neeson movie where he holds the phone and learns what happened and is forced to say, sighing deeply, I have a very particular set of skills, right? A tension that demands action, right? We have reached a moment where enough of the rising action has occurred that the main character is now forced to deviate from his original plan and start a whole new movie, right? We're no longer supporting our daughter as she travels Europe. We are now searching for her kidnappers and destroying them, right? The 90-degree angle causes enough tension that action must occur. And the tension, the 90-degree angle, is between the transiting Jupiter, this is the guy who makes everything bigger, juicier, more, and, can't make it out, the United States Chiron. Friends, what I mean by that is the United States wound. Chiron was a centaur who was a healer, and he was wounded in a way that it would not heal. It eventually did in a separate story. But the story about the Chiron that we're leveraging for this archetype, he had a wound that wouldn't heal. And instead of sort of drowning in that wound, he decided to create wisdom from that wound and leverage that wisdom in service of others, in service of healing others. He turned it into wisdom, right? And so when we think of the United States' early wounds, we are, of course, remembering the original sins, right? The patterns of abuse, theft, violations, exploitations that repeated and, frankly, in many ways continue to repeat through generations. Chiron is that harm, and Jupiter makes things bigger, even when they're hard. The goal, of course, is to make it bigger to reveal it, to grow it until it is undeniable. The guy standing in his house holding the phone, hearing the kidnapper's voice, good luck, he says. When divine enhancement meets cycles of harm, we are forced to face it. We are forced to face the roots of the wound and begin to understand the extent to which it remains. I'm sorry, but infected. We can't, y'all, we cannot, we will not evolve without acknowledging the violation at our core as a nation, right? So this assassination is forcing America to move in one direction or another, rooted in its own pain and its own foundational trauma. And that trauma is rooted in the ways that dehumanization inevitably leads to violence. Okay, but besides the trine, Mars trining Mars, making the action easy, besides the square, the Jupiter Chiron square, making the wound feel bigger, one of the hopeful things I see when I look at the chart, and there are many, yeah, we could easily be here all day on this, is that we have the transiting asteroid Hygeia literally the medicine woman asteroid, who signifies healing or the potential for healing. She is conjunct, meaning in the same place in the sky, as the United States Venus was at the moment of its inception. So we've got the traveling medicine woman hanging out with the United States sense of self-worth, of the United States values, of the United States ability to love, y'all. There is healing present while this wound is reopened dramatically. So all that's true, right? But of course, nothing in the world right now is simple because you guessed it, the great flying wedge of chaos that we are stuck with for give or take 7 years. That's the name astrologer Austin Coppock gives us the configuration in our sky that is demanding a total transformation of just about everything and demanding it the hard way. And if you're new here, let me add that this flying wedge of chaos is a set of planetary variables that have never, I mean, never been co-present during human history. In other words, you and me and everybody we know, this collection of inhabitants on this particular planet at this particular time, are at a mighty turning point in the trajectory of human history. One way or another, this pivotal moment we are living through will be one of the most studied, considered, and reconsidered moments in human development. It feels like it, right? Screenshots, people, screenshots for the historians that will, if we handle this right, be in a position to ponder and publish freely. Okay. So to review and to add some color to why the interactions between the sky and the United States are so potent and so out of the ordinary, we've got 3 points on this wedge of chaos, or this triangle, 3 points on a triangle, right? At the tip of this flying wedge, we have Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces and Neptune at 1 degree of Aries. So Pisces ends at 29, the Aries starts at 0, and then you've got 1. So you've got Saturn at the very end of Pisces skyland, and you've got Neptune at the very beginning of the Aries skyland. So they are in 2 different skylands, but real close to each other, which is a major factor in all of this. They are the spear point heading towards their exact conjunction in February of 2026 at 0 degrees of Aries, the world axis, the most public point in the entire zodiac. Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces is authority at the absolute crisis point. 29 degrees of any sign is the anaretic degree, the degree of fate, of karma, of bills coming due. In Pisces, the skyland of illusion and disillusion, Saturn is saying the delusions are dying. The fantasies are just about over, folks. Reality is about to assert itself with ruthless clarity. Saturn hurts. Often, not always, but often. Saturn's lessons are not fun, but they are necessary and they are for the greater good, right? So this ruthless clarity then is something we need and something we will not enjoy. So Neptune at 1 degrees of Aries is just beginning a new 165-year cycle. The last time Neptune entered Aries was 1861, when the Civil War began. And the last time these two met precisely in the sky was when the Berlin Wall fell. Neptune is dreams, illusions, spirituality. And Aries, the skyland of war and individual assertion. So Neptune creates spiritual warfare. But at 1 degree, he's just barely over that threshold. The new dream hasn't yet been formed. We are therefore between dreams, between myths, between stories about who we are and who we're going to be. When Saturn and Neptune meet in February, it will be the end of the collective delusion and the beginning of something else. We don't know what yet. That is being decided right now. Meanwhile, the second point on the triangle, Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius, you see how these are all either very, very late degrees or very, very early degrees. That's why it's like it ends up, when they bop around, it ends up periodically becoming in this perfect angles. So Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius is signaling a period of transformation, of trauma-informed revolution and innovation. Check, check, and check. The last time he was there, we had the American, French, and Haitian revolutions. I'm guessing you can see the themes there, right? And I should add that Mr. Transformation, Revolution, and Intensity is sitting on, right now, the US South Node, the point in the United States birth chart that signifies what the United States is letting go of throughout its existence, and at this point in particular. This has never happened in American history. for Pluto to sit on that point. Pluto is transformation through destruction. The South Node is our karma, our past, what we need to let go of. So what are we letting go of? Wherever a South Node is in a birth chart or in the sky at any moment, what is being let go of is the shadow side of that skyland, right? So when you're looking at a South Node in anyone's chart, you say, okay, which skyland is it sitting in? Every skyland, like every human and everything, has shadow and light, right? It has the stuff that is helpful and the stuff that is less helpful that we could let go of. And so when the South Node sits somewhere, its job is to drain the shadow of that particular skyland within that particular entity. And the shadow of the Aquarius skyland, where this is all happening, where Pluto, Mr. Intensity and Trauma and Transformation, is sitting on America's South Node. The shadow of Aquarius, where this is all happening, I swear to God, is cold intellectualization, detachment from humanity, and treating people as concepts rather than beings, right? And the third point in the sky, so you got Saturn, Neptune in one corner, you got Pluto in one, and then the third one you've got is Uranus in Gemini. And he's at this super flowy angle to Pluto's revolutionary situation over there. So Uranus, Mr. Sudden Change, in the skyland of ideas, is connecting easily with Mr. Intensity, trying to transform the United States with a fateful shadow reckoning. I'm going to say that again. Sudden change in the skyland of ideas is connecting easily with Intensity, trying to transform the United States with a fateful shadow reckoning. So this moment, y'all, is not only chaos, it is acceleration. Everything is speeding up, is breaking down, is breaking through. I know that you feel it. So you see, y'all, this assassination isn't happening in isolation. It is happening as part of this unprecedented cosmic configuration that is building towards something. We are not just living through history. We are living through a pivot point in human consciousness. There's a pattern here that is emerging that chills me a little bit. And it's not lost on me that I record this the morning after the young man who played the lead role in the Netflix show Adolescence was the youngest to ever win an Emmy. The show that asks us all to reconsider what it is to be young and male at this moment. So the shooter, the Wall Street Journal is now reporting, went on Discord after the assassination and wrote, "It was me." Just like that. Like he had completed a quest in a game. He made a joke here and there afterwards, but that's what he said. It was me. This echoes Jack Teixeira, the 21-year-old National Guardsman in Cape Cod who leaked classified documents on Discord last year. Do you remember him? He wasn't selling secrets to foreign powers or pursuing something ideological. He was showing off to other young men in a gaming server. The game he was playing was called Thug Shaker Central. Swear. He turned national security into Discord clout, treating classified intel like rare game loot to flex with. Both young men seemed unable to distinguish between online performance and real-world consequences. Discord, a platform built for gaming communication, became their confessional, their scoreboard, their place to brag about things that weren't games at all. Teixeira exposed national defense secrets for the same reason gamers share screenshots of rare achievements in games. The shooter announced his kill like he had just pulled off a particularly difficult headshot. This is what happens when we're so lost in the layers of irony, so deep in the game, that we forget there's a real world with real consequences. That is literally the Neptunian fantasy world meeting the Saturnian real world, right? So when everything is content, when everything is performance, when everything is for the reaction, murder becomes just another thing to post about. This confusion is not accidental. Vladimir Putin, arguably one of the most influential figures in our lifetime, has been playing this game masterfully for years, calling the Ukrainian leader a fascist and a Nazi while invading a sovereign nation and conducting genocidal warfare. He knows that if you muddy the waters enough, if you create enough layers of accusation and counter-accusation, people stop trying to figure out what's true. They retreat into nihilism. Everyone's a fascist. Nothing matters. Might makes right. And Kirk's assassination said just that. Both sides are fascist. This is weaponized confusion designed to exhaust our capacity for moral clarity. When the radical right calls everyone groomers and terrorists, and the shooter calls Kirk a fascist, and Putin calls Zelensky a Nazi, and everyone's calling everyone everything, words lose meaning. And when words lose meaning, only force remains by design. And so let's look a little deeper at just one of these variables to see what we can learn from the patterns that play out over time in the sky that might correlate to this pattern we are seeing here on Earth. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. And right now we're rhyming with some very specific moments when reality and fantasy, or reality and more specifically war games, became dangerously confused. And to do that, we're going to look specifically at Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces. And y'all, before I do, I want to inform you that Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces skyland is going to be interacting with a near solar eclipse this coming Sunday. So I'm going to talk about Saturn at 29 degrees because it had a deep and direct involvement with this assassination. But while I do, I want you to understand that the Saturn I'm talking about is going to be directly opposite, meaning interacting with significantly with the eclipse that is occurring on Sunday, the near total solar eclipse. We'll get to that in the end, but I just wanted to flag that for you as you listen to the story that I'm telling you about 29 degrees of Saturn. I mentioned it not to scare you, but to empower you, to help you understand what we're witnessing and the magnitude of it as it whispers to you about what actions you and we might need to take next. Because Saturn at 29 degrees is a variable through which games tend to end badly for gamers. The last time Saturn hit 29 degrees Pisces was March 29, 1996. The Unabomber's endgame was in motion. Ted Kaczynski would be arrested just 4 days later. His 18-year game of cat and mouse with the FBI, his manifesto about technology and society turned into mail bombs. It was all ending. The Oklahoma City bombing had just occurred while Saturn was in Pisces, as it is now. By the time we were beginning to understand that we were working with domestic terrorists who thought they were patriots playing soldiers, Saturn had advanced to the critical point it is today. The Montana Freeman standoff was just beginning, where a group of soldier citizens, people who had convinced themselves that legal reality was just a game they could opt out of, entered a standoff with the FBI. Before that, August 9th, 1966, Saturn was at 29 degrees of Pisces. America is deep in Vietnam. You've got this shooter in the tower at the University of Texas in Austin, the first modern mass shooting where a man, deeply troubled by an extraordinarily abusive father and deeply trained as a sharpshooter by the US Marines, turned the University of Texas into a shooting gallery, leveraging the high points he had been eyeing for years as a great place to, quote, hold off an army. The game of war the United States was playing in Vietnam came home in the form of a Marine who was trained to be a sniper, treating civilians like targets, and ending quite badly for him as the police made their way to the platform on which he stood. Before that, December 28th, 1937, the world is on a precipice. The Nanjing Massacre had just begun in China. Spain was being used as a testing ground for World War II weapons and tactics. Everyone could see that war was coming, but everyone kept playing diplomatic games, pretending negotiations meant something while militaries mobilized. Each time Saturn hits 29 degrees of Pisces, someone's delusion reaches a breaking point. The games we play, whether it's the Unabomber's intellectual terrorism, the Freeman's sovereign citizen fantasy, or nations pretending they are not already at war, the games end. Reality arrives. The confusion clears, often violently. But remember, our version of this comes with the added intensity and support. Please recall that all of the angles of the Great Flying Wedge are supportive angles. But the Great Flying Wedge of Chaos is sitting on our country's birth chart, demanding a reckoning with who we are and who we're going to be. So what the hell are we supposed to make of this as we watch fantasy meet reality? Okay, so what does all this cosmic weather actually mean for how we navigate this maddening game where everyone calls everyone else a fascist while actual fascism takes root? The shooter thought Kirk was a fascist. Kirk spent years calling trans people civilization destroyers. Miller calls anyone who criticizes them an enemy of the state. Putin plays this game masterfully. Everyone's a Nazi except the guy invading sovereign nations, and the administration using fascist tactics while calling their opponents fascists, threatening literally half the country with violence and retribution. You have known all along that this wasn't really a game. While others were treating politics like sport, democracy like entertainment, human dignity like memes, we have felt this in our bones. This was deadly serious, right? We've been watching them play with fascism like it is a joke, knowing that dehumanization never stays rhetorical. You've been one of the ones saying this is dangerous while perhaps being called alarmist or hysterical or too sensitive, right? And now here we are. The bullets are real. The deportations are real. The tribunals they are planning are real. Everything you warned of is happening. Everything we were afraid of is happening. The cosmic weather is revealing what we've understood all along, but we've been living in a society so lost in layers of irony, so deep in the game of politics as entertainment that most people forgot it was possible for the game to end. Or, as Steve Judd says, for our apprenticeship to end, for reality to assert itself, for consequences to arrive. The shooter's Helldivers references reveal our culture's predicament perfectly. In that game, you play fascists who think they're spreading democracy. It's satire, it's critique, it's a joke about American imperialism. But the shooter took the game seriously, or didn't, or both, or neither. We literally cannot tell what he believed because he was so lost in the layers of irony that even the murder became a meme. Jupiter squaring the United States Chiron says the wound is getting bigger, so big that even those who've been in denial can finally see it. The wound that we've been pointing to, the wound that we've been trying to heal, the wound that we've been worrying about, this is the madness of Saturn leaving Pisces and heading towards his moment with Neptune at the world point. All of those layers of confusion that we've been trying to cut through, all the fog we've been navigating, all the dreams within dreams we've been trying to wake people from. As Saturn joins Neptune in Aries in February, the game everyone has been playing ends. What you've known in your belly all along becomes undeniable. Here's what gives me hope. You've been in medicine all along. While they played games, you stayed real. While they got lost in layers, you held clarity. Hygeia, the healer, the great medicine woman in the sky, is sitting on America's Venus, America's capacity for love, for genuine values, for self-worth based on something real rather than performative. You and me and everyone we know, we see working for truth and actual freedom and actual healing are Hygeia's hands on this earth. We have collectively been holding the medicine of clarity of saying, this is the fascism without irony, treating democracy like it can actually be lost because we know it can. But listen, the administration knows the game is ending too. That is why they are moving so fast. They are trying to consolidate power while others are still trying to figure out which layer of irony we're on. But we are not confused. We see exactly what's happening. Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces says that the confusion is ending, vindicating everything we've been thinking and saying. Neptune in Aries says the new story will be written through action, not words. So many of us are good with words. We now have to shift towards action. The question isn't whether we'll show up. We always have. The question is to what extent we finally join together with one voice and move coherently with the clarity and hope for our country that we have been holding. Umberto Eco, who lived through actual fascism in Italy, wrote about this exact phenomenon in his essay, Eurofashion. The prefix "ur" comes from German, meaning original or primitive. So original fascism or primitive fascism, suggesting that something fundamental and recurring rather than historically specific can be found when we look at fascism. He warned that fascism would return not in black shirts and swastikas, but in forms we wouldn't immediately recognize, playful, ironic, mimetic. He wrote, quote, "The first feature of your fascism is the cult of tradition disguised as revolution." The first feature of your fascism is the cult of tradition disguised as revolution. Yeah, well, that's Helldivers too. Fascism disguised as democracy, tradition disguised as revolution, right? All wrapped in so many layers of irony that you cannot tell what anyone actually believes. Hannah Arendt warned us about this too. She said, quote, "The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, true and false, no longer exists." The shooter was living the dream of your fascism. That's where we are. We are lost in the layers, unable to distinguish between the game and the reality. The shooter couldn't tell. The administration is banking on us not being able to tell either. But honestly, I think the person who can show us the signpost for the way out is James Baldwin. I would quote him in every episode if I could. I mean, here's what he said about this particular question. Quote, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." That's the Jupiter Chiron square. The hate is the game that keeps us from feeling the pain. Sorry, I didn't mean to rhyme. But the wound is getting too big to ignore. The game is ending whether we want to or not. The time for all of us to gain a common consciousness of that pain has arrived. So how do we navigate the moment when the game is threatening to become so real? When each day makes us more afraid? First, I want to leave you with an action. Begin the conversation about what we're going to do. It's time, y'all. What do we do? How do we collectively stop this? I heard this story about an airplane that almost crashed. I saw this story online about this airplane that almost crashed. I'm so sorry I bring you stories from the internet and I don't know who told them. So please flag this for me if you do. But it's a story about an airplane that crashed. The man was on an airplane that had some landing problems, and the pilot was honest about this. They were about to land. They couldn't land. They had to circle because if they crash landed, they had to have spent a bunch of their gasoline, their fuel. And so for some long period, something that felt like a long period of time, this airplane full of people who knew that they might die were circling the airport in big wide circles. And the phenomenon that this man who was telling the story remarked upon was the fact that no one said anything. No one said a word. No one did anything except sit and like prepare some physical arrangements, but sit and wait. You know, everyone had their own thoughts in their head, but they were sitting and waiting. There was no action. And eventually they figured it out. I can't remember how the thing resolved, but they figured out they were going to be able to land easily. And when they got to the ground, the rescue people came, everybody got off the plane, everything turned out okay. But the thing he noticed was that the moment the pilot announced that they were going to be okay, oh, I'm going to start crying telling you this story. The moment that the pilot announced that they were going to be okay, everybody on the plane started crying, screaming, yelling, celebrating, sobbing, right? Because now they could feel, now they could act, right? Like he noticed there had been this like frozenness to the fear that burst the second the fear had passed. We are not going to have that opportunity, right? We are circling the airport and we're just worrying. But it is time before the pilot announces this is over, which is what we are all wishing for every day. Could someone just please show up and tell me this is over, right? That is not going to happen. But it is time for us to begin to react Anyway, let's cry, let's yell, let's gather, let's console, let's hold, let's connect, let's plan. This is harder than it sounds. We are so used to the performance, the irony, the game, that sincerity feels dangerous, feels vulnerable, right? Sincerity is the antidote to this confusion. Sincerity is real, right? Saturn demands reality. Sincerity is real. When you say this hurts people, and you also say this has to stop soon, and mean it without qualification or cleverness, or some like sort of effective bantery tone, you cut through the layers and you begin to change your own orientation to the situation too. We have to start yelling and screaming and crying and pretend and preparing as if the pilot has already announced that we're safe. The other thing to think about is, what is your lane? What is your skill? What is your craft? What is your gift? What is your offering? How can you use your own capacity to stop this? What do you do on the plane, right? What do you do when we decide it's time to move? What role can you play? Discuss this with each other and with me too. For me, here's how I understand my lane. I can see patterns. I can read the sky. I can write and I can speak decently. So this is my thing. this is how I'm trying to help, right? I'm going to have to help with my family, with my neighborhood, with my neighbors, right? I'm going to have to gather and rise and connect and convene and plan with other humans. But this part is my lane, is my craft, and I offer it to you as part of what it needs to happen now as we begin to yell. What is yours? What is your lane? What's your craft? What's your offering? Okay, second, a practice. Every time you encounter political content, whether it is news, memes, or discourse, ask yourself, what layer am I on? What game is being played here? What is actually real underneath all of this? And then ground yourself in what you know to be true. People are dying. Families are being separated. Entire organizations on the side of truth and freedom are being threatened and silenced. Democracy is officially under threat. These are not games. These aren't memes. These are real things happening to real people. These are real things happening to you, happening to me, happening to people we love and projects we care about. So practice removing one layer of irony from your own communication each day. If you're angry, say you're angry. If you're scared, say you're scared. Stop hiding behind cleverness, or even the argument. The game is up. It is time to be real. September 10th was for us, for this generation, for this lifetime, for humanity, the day, not that the music died, but the day that the debate died. Mr. Kirk and his efforts to create a legitimate seeming discourse about whether or not all humans have value has passed from this earth. September 10th was the day the debate died. And third, I'm going to leave you with an inspiration, a poem. I'm going to read a little bit of this poem by Ocean Vuong called Someday I Will Love Ocean Vuong. Min is writing to himself as a younger man. He is seeing the pain and the confusion that is so common in adolescence and increasingly more so today. He starts with this. Ocean, don't be afraid. The end of the road is so far ahead, it is already behind us. Don't worry, your father is only your father until one of you forgets, like how the spine won't remember its wings, no matter how many times our knees kiss the pavement. Ocean, are you listening? Somewhere in the middle of the poem, he says this: don't be afraid. The gunfire is only the sound of people trying to live a little longer and failing. Ocean, ocean, get up. The most beautiful part of your body is where it's headed. And remember, loneliness is still time spent with the world. Here is the room with everyone in it. And then he ends with, here is a desk with the gimp leg and a brick to make it last. Yes, here is a room so warm and so blood close. I swear you will wake and mistake these walls for skin. Yeah, we can heal ourselves. We can heal our young men. We can heal our country. We do this by speaking now, by connecting now, by reaching across time and space and pain to recapture and amend what is so broken in our collective now. If you would like to understand how these patterns are affecting your personal chart, how your own relationship to truth and reality is being activated during this threshold moment, I offer readings and coaching that will help you navigate your unique assignment during this time. I also ask that you do the things, that you subscribe, that you like, that you review, that you comment, because every single time you interact with this on any platform, it is now on YouTube, it is on Substack. I think those are all the places. But then I'm posting content on Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky and some shorts on YouTube. But reach out. Let's talk about it. My email is in the description. Building community around clarity is part of how we resist this. Let's continue to build this one. Until next time, remember, the game is ending. The confusion is clearing. Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces says no more pretending. Neptune entering Aries says actions have consequences. Chiron squaring with Jupiter says the wound is being revealed so that it can be healed. We are at the end of our apprenticeship, y'all. Time to stop practicing and start doing. Time to stop playing and start being. It's time to stop gaming the system and start defending it, or building something better entirely in its place. The cosmic weather is intense, but it is weather for clarity, not just chaos. Yes, chaos, certainly, but it is for clarity. It is for healing. How we navigate this transition from dangerous game to promising reality, that remains my sacred choice and yours. So until next time, y'all, be well, be conscious, and be kind. I will see you soon.